Irene Nikolaevna was born in the Soviet Union and was a strong-willed woman, fiercely protective of her only son, Alex, and incredibly opinionated when it came to his life choices. From her perspective, her involvement in his decisions wasn't just a preference, it was her right, especially since she had invested financially in many of them. She'd even contributed half the money for his and his wife Maria's new apartment, which she saw as a way to ensure she had a say in where they lived and how they arranged their life. But one afternoon, Alex dropped by with news that left her reeling. Instead of consulting her as she'd assumed he would, Alex informed her that he and Maria had already completed the purchase of the apartment, without her input. The contract was signed, the deal finalized, and Irene's hopes of guiding the selection process had vanished without a word of warning. When he calmly announced that they'd chosen a place on the other side of town, her initial shock turned to outrage. "You went and bought some rundown place without even asking me," she fumed, her voice rising with each word. "Do you have any idea what a terrible mistake that is?" Irene was aghast as Alex described the apartment. It was older, needed renovations, and was far from the upscale area she'd imagined for him. In her eyes, Maria must have manipulated him into this poor decision, choosing the location deliberately to put distance between them. "How could you buy a place so far from me? You know I'll hardly ever see you," Irene accused, her voice trembling with a mixture of hurt and resentment. "Maria did this to keep you away from me, didn't she?" Alex sighed, trying to calm her. "Mom, it's a great neighborhood, and it's close to our jobs. Maria picked it for the schools and amenities nearby. This is our future, and we needed a place that worked for us, not just for you. Schools, amenities, you're just making excuses." Irene spat, glaring at him. "You've let her turn you into a fool, Alex. You'd be nowhere without me, without the money I gave you. And this is how you repay me?" The tension between them only escalated. Irene's chest tightened as her anger surged, and she clutched at her heart, suddenly breathless. Seeing his mother struggling, Alex hurried to grab her heart medication, urging her to take a breath. "Mom, please, calm down," he murmured, handing her the pills. "This isn't worth getting so upset over." "You think I'm just overreacting?" she asked, her voice breaking. "You have no idea what it feels like to be abandoned by your own son." She slumped into a chair, her hand still at her chest, tears beginning to gather in her eyes. "I'm going to end up old and alone, with no one to even bring me a glass of water when I need it." Alex took her hands, attempting to reassure her, though he was growing frustrated. "You're not alone, Mom. You're healthy and energetic, and we'll visit often. I'll come by whenever I can, you'll see." But Irene only shook her head, refusing to let go of her disappointment. She finally told him, in no uncertain terms, that she wanted nothing to do with the apartment they'd chosen. "If you don't need my opinion, then I won't be stepping foot in that place," she declared, her voice steely with finality. "You two can live there however you want. Just don't expect me to come running." Alex returned home after his unsettling conversation with Irene, feeling deeply conflicted. He knew his mother's reaction would be strong, but he hadn't anticipated the intensity of her anger. As soon as he walked through the door, Maria could tell something was wrong. She approached him, her brow furrowed with concern, but he simply sighed, not wanting to go into detail. "Maria," he began cautiously, "my mother is upset about the apartment. She feels like she should have been more involved in the decision since she helped financially." He hesitated, glancing at her, trying to gauge her reaction. Maria's shoulders slumped slightly, a flicker of frustration crossing her face. This was not the first time Irene had tried to exert control over their lives, and it wasn't the first time Alex had struggled to balance his loyalty to her with his duty to Maria. "Alex, I get that she's your mom and that she contributed," Maria replied gently but firmly. "But this is our home. We needed a place that worked for us, not one she would approve of." Alex nodded, knowing she was right, but he couldn't shake the guilt instilled in him by his mother's accusations. "She thinks you chose this apartment to keep her at a distance," he murmured, almost ashamed to voice the words. "She's convinced that you're trying to isolate me from her." Maria let out a sigh, pressing her hand to her forehead. Alex, I've never wanted to isolate you from her. I just wanted us to make a choice for ourselves, to live somewhere that suits our lives. She looked him in the eye, her gaze steady. This isn't about her. It's about us, about building a life on our terms. Despite Maria's sincerity, Alex couldn't shake his mother's words. He knew Irene expected constant visits, dinners, and holidays together. And though he wanted to support Maria, the thought of going against his mother's wishes felt like a betrayal. Irene had always made sacrifices for him. Her insistence on being involved in every detail of his life was, in her view, an extension of her devotion. But Irene's anger didn't stop at words. Over the following weeks, she began excluding Maria from family events. Birthdays, holidays, and celebrations, all of which had once included Maria, were now suddenly family-only occasions in Irene's eyes. She claimed it was her right as the mother to decide who was welcome, leaving Alex to pick up the pieces and make excuses for her behavior. Each family gathering became a source of stress for Alex. When he attended without Maria, he felt his mother's unspoken approval, but his own sense of guilt gnawed at him. And when he chose to stay home with Maria, his mother would call, her tone laced with disappointment, reminding him of everything she had done for him. Every family visit he attended without his wife only deepened the rift between him and Maria, yet every refusal to go angered Irene further. In one particularly tense moment, Maria sat him down to discuss the impact this was having on their marriage. Alex, she said, her voice soft but determined, I can't keep pretending this isn't affecting us. Every time you leave me behind, I feel like I'm being cut out of our own family. I don't deserve this, and neither do you. He looked at her, the weight of his mother's expectations and Maria's hurt crashing down on him. I know, Maria, he replied, struggling to find the right words. But she's my mother. She feels like she's being replaced, like she's losing me. Maria's voice grew firmer, a trace of sadness mixed with frustration. Alex, you're a grown man with a life of your own. You have a family now, us. I'm not asking you to cut her out. I'm asking you to stand by me, to show her that our marriage matters too. But despite Maria's pleas, Alex continued to be torn, trapped between the two women he loved. Each visit with his mother left him more drained, and each strained conversation with Maria left him feeling increasingly isolated. Irene's resentment of Maria didn't ease, and her dismissive attitude became a constant, painful reminder of her disapproval. As the months passed, Maria grew tired of the rift that had slowly become a fixture in their lives. Her patience began to wear thin as the invitations from Irene's side dwindled until they stopped entirely. What had once been small grievances had now grown into a deep, unresolved divide, and Maria couldn't help but feel she was fighting for a marriage in which she would always be second to Alex's mother. Meanwhile, Irene took every chance to remind Alex of her displeasure. Look what she's doing to you, she'd say with a cold look. Can't you see how she's pushing you away from your own mother? I've been with you through everything, and she can't stand it. Is this the woman you really want by your side? Alex felt increasingly worn down, struggling to balance his loyalty to his mother with the love he had for his wife. But no matter how hard he tried, each compromise only seemed to worsen the situation, and the rift between his mother and Maria grew deeper with each passing day. As Irene continued to exclude Maria from family events, the tension only grew stronger. Maria's frustration turned to quiet resignation. At first, she had hoped Irene's behavior would be a phase, that Alex's mother would eventually see the strength of their marriage and come to accept her as part of the family. But as time passed, Maria realized that Irene's resentment was more deeply rooted than she had ever expected. Each family gathering was now a reminder of how little she was valued in Irene's eyes. Alex, still caught in the middle, tried to keep the peace, though it was increasingly obvious that peace was slipping away. Irene's subtle yet relentless disapproval had turned Maria's marriage into a balancing act. Whenever a family celebration approached, Alex faced a choice that only seemed to have wrong answers. If he went without Maria, she felt excluded and hurt, but if he declined the invitation, his mother would become furious, calling him to guilt-trip him about abandoning his family. The silent battles turned every holiday into an emotional minefield. Thanksgiving came, and Irene called to invite Alex but made it clear that Maria wasn't welcome. "It's just family this time, Alex," she said, her voice clipped. "You understand." That night, Maria watched as Alex tried to find words to tell her that she wasn't invited again. She looked down, took a steady breath, and forced a sad smile. "It's okay, Alex. Go if you want to. I'll be fine." But Alex could see the disappointment in her eyes, and the guilt washed over him. "I'm sorry, Maria. I know this isn't fair. I wish things were different," he said, reaching out to hold her hand. Maria simply nodded, her silence saying what words couldn't. "I know you're in a difficult position," she replied, her voice calm but tinged with sadness. "But this isn't just about Thanksgiving, Alex. It's about respect. Your mother has made it very clear that she doesn't accept me, and each time you go without me, it feels like you're choosing her over us." Her words struck him, and he tried to reassure her, telling her that he loved her, that his mother's feelings didn't change how much he valued their marriage. But Maria had grown tired of the repeated apologies, the empty reassurances. She wanted action, not words. Each time Alex left her behind for another family event, Maria would feel that aching emptiness all over again. She filled her evenings alone with quiet activities, catching up on reading, watching movies, visiting friends. But it wasn't the same. She couldn't escape the gnawing feeling of being an outsider in her own marriage, left out of gatherings that should have been a shared experience. Eventually, Irene's behavior grew bolder. She began dropping thinly veiled remarks to Alex about his marriage, making her disapproval all the more obvious. "You know, Alex," she'd say, her tone casual but loaded, "I'm only thinking of what's best for you. This woman, she's taking you far away from your own family. I raised you to be loyal, but look at what's happening." Alex, caught between defending his wife and wanting to avoid an argument, would brush off her comments with forced neutrality. But each time, he felt a growing resentment toward his mother for her interference, and toward himself for his inability to protect Maria from this mistreatment. The situation reached a breaking point one weekend when Irene threw a large family gathering. She'd extended the invitation to everyone in the family, everyone except Maria. Alex had planned to stay home, tired of the constant tension, but Irene called him with a persuasive plea. "Alex, this is family. Everyone's coming, and you're part of this family. Are you really going to miss out because of her?" Under pressure, Alex reluctantly went to the event, leaving Maria behind once again. When he returned that evening, he found her sitting quietly in the living room, her expression unreadable. He could sense her frustration, her exhaustion, even though she said nothing. She simply looked at him and shook her head, her disappointment apparent without a single word. That night, Maria finally broke her silence. "Alex, I can't keep doing this," she said, her voice trembling with controlled emotion. "I feel like I'm in a marriage with a shadow. Every time your mother pulls you away from me, I feel less and less like a partner in this relationship." Alex sighed, his own frustration surfacing. "Maria, it's just for now. I know my mother is difficult, but she'll come around eventually. She'll learn to accept us, and this will pass." Maria looked at him, her gaze hardening. "Will it, Alex? Or am I just fooling myself, thinking that one day she'll actually see me as your wife? Because right now, it feels like I'm invisible to her, and to you, whenever she's involved." Alex's silence was his answer, and Maria's heart sank. She realized that unless he was willing to take a stand, nothing would ever change. As summer approached, Irene announced her plans to spend the season at her family's country house, where she intended to do repairs and tend to the large garden. She called Alex, insisting that he join her to help out with the work, reminding him that she'd be alone otherwise. When Alex brought this up with Maria, she raised an eyebrow, clearly frustrated. "So, you're going to spend the entire summer helping her at the country house?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "What about us? We were supposed to spend this summer together." Alex looked down, choosing his words carefully. "Maria, she's my mother. She needs help, and there's no one else to do it. You know she can't manage everything on her own out there. I'll just be gone on weekends, and it's only for a few months." Maria shook her head, her patience wearing thin. "Alex, your mother doesn't want my help, and now you're just expected to leave me every weekend? This isn't just about helping her, she's doing everything she can to keep us apart." "I understand how you feel," Alex replied, exasperation creeping into his tone. "But she's family. You don't just walk away from family responsibilities." Maria's frustration simmered. "Alex, I am also your family. When are you going to prioritize us?" Despite her protests, Alex continued with his plan to spend the weekends at the country house, leaving Maria behind. She quickly grew resentful, realizing that this wasn't just about Alex helping his mother, it was Irene's way of controlling him, of ensuring she kept her son close and kept Maria at a distance. During those weekends alone, Maria would often sit by herself, scrolling through social media, watching her friends with their partners, feeling the loneliness deepen with each post. She began attending gatherings and events on her own, visiting friends who noticed her growing unhappiness. One weekend, she confided in her friend Anna, who listened sympathetically. "It's like I'm married to a ghost," Maria admitted, her voice thick with frustration. "Alex and I barely spend time together anymore, and every time I bring it up, he just says it's his duty to his mother." Anna put a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Maria, you've been incredibly patient, but you deserve better than this. A marriage is supposed to be a partnership. He's letting his mother drive a wedge between you, and you're the one paying the price." Hearing those words, Maria felt a spark of anger and resolve. She realized that she'd spent too much time waiting for Alex to prioritize her, to stand up to his mother. She needed to take control of her own happiness. By July, Alex's trips to the country house had become routine. As he prepared to leave one Friday evening, Maria approached him with a calmness that belied her frustration. "I won't be here when you get back," she said simply. Alex froze, looking at her in confusion. "What do you mean? Are you going somewhere?" "Yes," she replied, meeting his gaze with a steady resolve. "I'm going to take a break, Alex. I need to recharge, to take care of myself for once. Since you're busy with your mother, I'll be busy too." Without another word, she walked away, leaving him speechless. That weekend, while Alex was at his mother's house, Maria booked a solo trip to the coast. She boarded a plane to Turkey, feeling a bittersweet freedom as she left behind the stress, the constant push and pull between her marriage and his mother's demands. She spent her days on the beach, unwinding and letting go of the tension that had built up over months. The sound of the waves, the warmth of the sun, it was the first peace she had felt in a long time. When Alex returned to an empty apartment, he was stunned. He called her, expecting her to answer from a friend's house, but Maria's voice came from a distant, echoing line. "Where are you?" he asked, his voice thick with confusion. "I'm in Turkey," she replied, sounding relaxed, maybe even happy. "I needed this, Alex. You chose to spend your summer with your mother. I chose to spend mine somewhere I could finally feel free." Alex was speechless, unable to process what he was hearing. He finally stammered, "I thought we'd agreed to spend the summer working things out, Maria. Not running away." She laughed softly, though there was sadness in her voice. "Alex, I waited. I waited while you left me every weekend to play the dutiful son. And now, I'm choosing to be a dutiful wife, to myself." The line went silent, and Alex felt the weight of her words settle over him. As he stood alone in their empty apartment, he realized that the rift he had been avoiding for months had grown into a chasm, one he might not be able to bridge. Alex was left reeling from Maria's unexpected trip. He sat in the quiet of their apartment, trying to process the reality that his wife, who had once been patient and forgiving, had now chosen to leave for some much-needed distance. The tension he'd brushed off as temporary now felt like a looming crisis. He called her repeatedly that week, each conversation strained, as he tried to understand how things had gone so wrong. When she finally returned, he eagerly went to pick her up from the airport, hoping to find a way to repair the growing gap between them. But the moment he saw her, he noticed a new change in her demeanor. Maria looked refreshed, her face relaxed and calm in a way he hadn't seen in months. She offered a polite hug, but her eyes were guarded, her warmth toward him noticeably cooler. In the car, the silence was thick, neither knowing quite how to begin the conversation that needed to happen. Finally, Alex broke the tension, saying, "Maria, I know things have been difficult. But you could have told me you needed space, instead of just leaving." Maria sighed, looking out the window. "Alex, I did tell you. I told you every time I asked you to prioritize us, to be here with me instead of at your mother's. But every time, you left. I needed to remind myself that my happiness doesn't have to come second." Alex looked down, gripping the steering wheel, unsure how to respond. "I understand," he said quietly. "But things with my mother aren't simple, Maria. She raised me, she sacrificed a lot for me, and I can't just walk away from that." "Neither can I, apparently," Maria replied, her tone weary. "Alex, I've done everything I could to be understanding, but at some point, I need to matter too. Your mother may have raised you, but I'm supposed to be your wife. When does that count for something?" The conversation left him unsettled, but as much as he wanted to fix things, Alex found himself repeatedly drawn back into his mother's demands. Every weekend, Irene would call, inviting him to the country house for one small task or urgent need after another. Whenever he brought up his marriage issues, she brushed them aside. "Your wife needs to understand the importance of family," she'd say dismissively, as though Maria's feelings were trivial. "When did family become something to walk away from, Alex? I'm your mother. Maria will just have to learn that marriage isn't only about her." Alex found himself caught in an impossible tug-of-war. On one side was his mother, who dismissed Maria's needs and warned that she'd be lost without him, relying on his support to keep her stable and cared for. On the other side was Maria, whose patience was slipping further with every unfulfilled promise, every lonely weekend. One weekend, Maria finally made her stand. Alex had packed his things, preparing to go to his mother's, when she stopped him at the door. "Alex, if you walk out again, it'll be the last time. I can't live like this anymore." He looked at her, startled. "Maria, she needs me. It's just for a couple more days." "No, Alex," she replied, her voice resolute. "She doesn't need you, she wants control over you. There's a difference. And as long as you keep running to her, you're choosing her over us." The ultimatum hung heavy in the air, and though her words stung, Alex couldn't bring himself to ignore his mother's call. "Maria, please understand. This is temporary." Maria's eyes filled with the heartbreak of months of neglect. "Temporary?" she echoed bitterly. "Temporary would have ended a long time ago. This isn't a phase, Alex. It's a choice you make every time you walk out that door." Unable to meet her gaze, he left, hoping she would cool down and understand his obligations. But by the time he returned that Sunday, he was met with an apartment that felt emptier than ever. That Sunday evening, Alex returned home to find Maria waiting for him, her bags packed and sitting by the front door. The sight jolted him, his heart pounding as he realized that her patience had run out. She looked up as he entered, her expression weary but resolute. "Are you leaving?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Maria nodded, her gaze steady. "Alex, I'm done waiting. I've tried to be understanding, to make this work, but nothing has changed. Every time, you choose her over us. I can't keep sacrificing my happiness for someone who refuses to see me as part of this family." Alex reached out, desperation etched on his face. "Maria, please. I love you. This isn't what I want." She shook her head, a sad smile crossing her lips. "If you loved me the way you say you do, Alex, you'd be here. You'd show me that I matter more than your mother's whims. But you've made your choice, and I have to make mine." The finality of her words hit him like a blow. He opened his mouth to argue, to make promises he wasn't sure he could keep, but Maria stopped him, holding up a hand. "I need you to listen, Alex," she said, her voice firm but calm. "This isn't just about your mother, it's about us, our future, and the life we were supposed to build together. I wanted a partner, someone who would put our relationship first. But you've shown me that your loyalty lies elsewhere. He stood silent, grappling with the reality of her words. For the first time, he realized that he had taken her love and patience for granted, assuming she would always be there no matter how many times he left her to attend to his mother's demands. Now, watching her with her bags packed, he understood that he might have pushed her too far. "Maria," he murmured, his voice filled with regret, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to get to this point." Her face softened for a brief moment, but her resolve remained unshaken. "I know you didn't, Alex. But intention only goes so far. I can't keep living in the shadow of your mother's influence. I deserve a partner who's fully present." As she walked to the door, he reached out one last time, his voice desperate. "Please, don't go. I can change. I'll talk to her, I'll set boundaries." Maria paused, her eyes reflecting the pain of months spent fighting for his attention. "Alex, I've waited long enough for those words. You can promise me anything right now, but I need to see action, not apologies." With that, she picked up her bags and left, leaving Alex standing alone in the empty apartment. The door closed behind her, the echo of it reverberating through the silence. The weight of his decision settled over him, and he felt a hollow ache he hadn't anticipated, a painful clarity that he might have lost the best thing in his life. As the days passed, he tried to reach out to her, sending messages and calling repeatedly, but her responses were brief, her tone distant. She had reached a place he couldn't touch, a boundary he had created through his own choices. For the first time, Alex realized that Maria wasn't simply giving him space to change, she was reclaiming her life, a life that no longer included him. One evening, he sat alone, sifting through old photos of them together, images of a happier time before his mother's interference had poisoned their relationship. His heart sank with the weight of regret, knowing that each choice he had made, every time he'd left her for his mother's demands, had slowly dismantled the love they'd once shared. Alex spent days torn between his loyalty to his mother and his desire to win Maria back. He began pulling away from Irene, declining her demands for weekend visits and reminding her that he had responsibilities to his marriage. Irene, sensing the shift, grew furious, accusing him of being manipulated by Maria, of choosing his wife over his real family. For the first time, he found himself standing up to her. "Mom, I love you, but this is my marriage. Maria deserves better than what I've given her. I can't keep living my life under your control." But the realization came too late. Maria had heard every promise before, and she'd reached a point of no return. After Alex's refusal to continue his weekly visits, Irene's disappointment quickly turned to fury. She called him every evening, her voice laced with accusations and hurt. "You've turned your back on me for her," she would ask, her tone edged with disbelief. "After everything I've done for you, after every sacrifice, this is how you repay me?" Alex tried to keep his tone calm, reminding her that Maria was his wife and that their relationship deserved respect. But Irene wouldn't hear it. "That girl has poisoned you," she spat, her anger rising with each word. "She's made you weak, Alex. I raised you better than this." Her words struck a nerve, igniting years of unspoken resentment that he'd kept buried. For so long, he had allowed his mother's influence to shape his choices, sacrificing his independence for her approval. But now, faced with losing Maria, he saw clearly how deeply Irene's control had overshadowed his life. "Mom," he said firmly, interrupting her tirade, "I love you, but I'm done choosing between you and my wife. Maria deserves my loyalty. She's been patient, and I've let her down." Irene's shock was palpable. She had never heard him speak to her this way, never imagined he would set boundaries. Her response was immediate, a mixture of hurt and outrage. "After everything I've given you, after all I've sacrificed, you're going to let her ruin this family?" "It's not about ruining anything," Alex replied, his voice resolute. "It's about saving my marriage. I can't keep living this double life. You need to understand that Maria is my family too." But Irene was unmoved. She launched into a long, tearful speech, reminding him of all she had done for him, of the sacrifices she'd made as a single mother to provide for him. She painted herself as the victim, casting Maria as the one who had come between them, manipulating him away from his real family. Exhausted, Alex tried to reason with her. "Mom, this isn't about Maria versus you. This is about me, about the life I need to build on my own terms. Can't you respect that?" But Irene's response was as sharp as it was unwavering. "I won't accept that woman in this family," she declared. "If you choose her, you're choosing a life without me." The ultimatum hit him hard. He'd hoped that with time, she might soften, that she would eventually see reason. But now he realized that Irene's hold on him was too deeply rooted, her view of family loyalty too rigid. She saw Maria not as her son's partner, but as an intruder, an enemy who had taken away her influence over him. That night, Alex sat alone, his mother's words replaying in his mind, each one a painful reminder of the tight grip she held over his life. He knew he had to choose, once and for all. The question that had haunted him for so long now felt inescapable. Would he sacrifice his marriage to keep his mother's approval, or would he finally take a stand, risking her wrath to save what was left of his relationship with Maria? The weight of the decision pressed on him, but he knew one thing for sure: if he chose his mother's approval, he would lose Maria forever. Days passed, and Alex's internal battle only grew more intense. His mother's ultimatum haunted him, but so did Maria's absence. He reached out to her every day, trying to win back her trust. Her responses were polite, but distant, as though she were already somewhere far beyond his reach. Each text or call reminded him of how deeply he had failed her, and he knew that words alone wouldn't bring her back. Finally, after a sleepless night, he decided to confront Irene once and for all. He arrived at her home early in the morning, a sense of resolve anchoring him. Irene answered the door with a look of satisfaction, assuming he'd come to apologize, to fall back in line. But as soon as she saw the determination in his eyes, her expression changed. "Mom," he began, his voice steady, "we need to talk. And this time, I need you to listen." Irene crossed her arms, her lips pursed in disapproval. "I've heard enough, Alex. You're abandoning your own mother for a girl who's done nothing but divide this family." He shook his head, refusing to be swayed. "That's not what this is about, and you know it. Maria is my wife. She deserves respect, she deserves to feel like part of this family, and I'm done letting you treat her like an outsider." Irene's expression hardened, her voice low and unyielding. "So, you're choosing her over me? After everything I sacrificed for you, this is how you repay me?" Alex took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "I'm not choosing between you and her. I'm choosing a life where I can have my wife and my mother in harmony. But you're the one making this impossible, Mom. You've refused to accept her from day one, and I let it go on for too long. I love you, but this is destroying my marriage." Irene's face twisted with indignation. "She's manipulated you, Alex. She's convinced you that I'm the problem when I only want what's best for you. She's tearing you away from your real family." "No," Alex replied firmly, "you're doing that by pushing her away. I'm here, asking you to be part of my life, our life, with Maria included. But if you can't accept that, then I have to make a choice for my own happiness." Irene stared at him, her silence thick with disbelief. Alex could see the hurt in her eyes, the realization that he was serious, that he was no longer willing to bend to her will. She stood frozen, her grip on him slipping for the first time. "Fine," she finally whispered, her tone filled with bitterness. "If that's how you want it, then go. Build your life with her. But don't expect me to be part of it. You'll regret this one day, Alex." He swallowed hard, fighting the sadness that her words stirred. He had known this confrontation would hurt, but he hadn't expected her rejection to feel so final, so absolute. "Mom, I'm sorry you feel that way. I wish it didn't have to be this way. But I can't keep living like this." Without another word, he turned and walked out, each step heavy with the loss of a mother who refused to accept his choice. As he left, he felt the weight of years of loyalty and obligation lifting, replaced by a painful freedom. He was finally choosing his own life, his own happiness. That evening, Alex called Maria. This time, his voice held no hesitation. I told her everything. I told her that I'm choosing you, that I'm done letting her control our lives. Maria's silence was tentative, her voice soft when she finally spoke. Alex, I've heard those promises before. What makes this time different? Because I stood up to her, he replied, his tone resolute. For the first time, I made it clear that I'm committed to us, no matter what. She paused, the gravity of his words sinking in. After a long silence, she finally said, We'll see, Alex. I want to believe you. But I need to see you follow through. Though her response wasn't the reassurance he'd hoped for, he understood. This was his chance to rebuild their trust, to show her through actions what words had failed to prove. Alex knew that a single conversation wouldn't heal the months of neglect and hurt he had caused. Winning Maria back would take time, and he was prepared to show her through actions rather than promises. In the days that followed, he gave her the space she needed while also staying present, demonstrating his commitment in small, tangible ways. Every weekend, he stayed home, turning down his mother's calls when she tried to pull him back into her orbit. Irene's tone grew colder with each rejection, her disappointment palpable. She would send messages laden with guilt, reminding him of her sacrifices, her loneliness, but Alex held firm. He had finally chosen his marriage over his mother's expectations, and though it wasn't easy, he was determined to prove his loyalty to Maria. One evening, Alex took a bold step and invited Maria to dinner. She was hesitant at first, unsure if she could trust him again. But she agreed, seeing this as a chance to gauge his sincerity. He took her to a quiet restaurant and spoke to her openly, laying bare the realization that had come from his painful confrontation with his mother. Maria, he began, his voice steady but filled with remorse, I know I've failed you. I let my mother's expectations dictate our lives, and it cost us both so much. But I'm ready to change that, to put us first, no matter what. Maria studied him, her gaze cautious but searching. I appreciate you saying that, Alex, but words aren't enough. I need to feel like I'm truly your partner, not just someone standing in the shadow of your mother's influence. Alex nodded, fully aware of the depth of her hurt. You're right, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove that to you. I want to rebuild our marriage on your terms. No more broken promises, no more choosing anyone else over us. Their conversation was laced with the unspoken pain of the months they'd endured, but Maria's resolve began to soften as she saw the sincerity in his eyes. For the first time in a long while, she felt that perhaps he was finally ready to prioritize their life together. In the weeks that followed, Alex took every opportunity to show Maria that he was committed to change. He joined her for outings with her friends, listened intently when she shared her thoughts, and made an effort to engage in the life she wanted to build together. Bit by bit, the walls that had grown between them started to crumble. But Irene was not done with her attempts to regain control. She sent him messages filled with guilt-laden pleas and accusations, even going so far as to claim that she had fallen ill due to the stress he'd caused. In the past, this would have been enough to send Alex rushing to her side, but now he saw through her manipulation. He called to check on her well-being but refused to drop everything and leave Maria to attend to her demands. You have a family of your own now, Alex, he reminded himself each time Irene's words triggered that familiar sense of guilt. It's time to live for that. One day, Irene called him, her tone cold and defeated. I see you've chosen her over your own mother, she said bitterly. I hope she's worth the family you're losing. But Alex didn't falter. Mom, I haven't lost my family, I'm building one. I want you to be part of my life, but not if it means sacrificing my marriage. The finality in his words left Irene silent, her hold over him loosening as he reaffirmed his commitment to his own happiness and independence. Back at home, Maria watched these changes unfold with cautious optimism. She saw the effort, the boundaries he had set, and the strength he was gaining in standing up for their marriage. Slowly, she began to let herself believe that the man she had fallen in love with was finally ready to be her partner in every sense. One evening, as they sat together in the apartment, Maria reached for his hand, her voice gentle. "I can see you're trying, Alex. I'm starting to believe that maybe we can move forward, after all." Alex looked at her, gratitude and relief filling his heart. "I won't let you down, Maria. This time, it's you and me, all the way." They both knew that there was still healing to be done, but for the first time, they felt a shared hope. The path ahead would be challenging, but they were finally on it together, ready to rebuild the love that had nearly been lost. Months passed, and with each day, Alex and Maria's bond grew stronger. The scars of the past remained, but they began to fade as both committed to rebuilding trust, moment by moment. Alex continued to show his loyalty through actions, not promises, and Maria saw how deeply he was dedicated to their future together. They had moved beyond the apologies and into a phase of genuine partnership, with each learning to prioritize the other in ways they hadn't before. One crisp Saturday morning, Alex suggested they take a drive to the countryside for a peaceful escape from the city. Maria agreed, and they found themselves winding through back roads lined with autumn-colored trees, a reminder of how far they had come. As they settled into a quiet spot by a lake, Alex took Maria's hand, his face soft with gratitude. "Maria," he began, his voice filled with sincerity, "I want you to know that I understand what real partnership is now. This past year, I had to confront myself, and my loyalty was tested in ways I never expected. I nearly lost you, but now, I feel like I've finally earned the right to be by your side." Maria looked at him, her expression reflecting a mixture of relief and affection. "You've shown me that you're willing to make our life a priority. For so long, I felt like an outsider in our own marriage, but you've proven to me that you're here now, for us." They sat in a comfortable silence, the tranquility of the lake matching the newfound peace in their relationship. Alex realized that he had finally reached a place of emotional independence, a place where he no longer felt torn between his mother and his wife. He was at peace with the choices he had made, knowing they were rooted in a genuine desire to build a balanced life. Later that evening, as they returned home, Alex's phone rang. The caller ID showed his mother's name, and he hesitated, looking at Maria for guidance. She gave him a small, supportive smile, silently urging him to answer with strength. This time, Alex was prepared to set boundaries, knowing his commitment to his marriage would come first. He answered the call, and Irene's familiar voice greeted him with a weary tone. She spoke about her loneliness, subtly hinting at her disappointment in his distance. But this time, Alex listened without allowing guilt to creep in. "Mom," he said gently but firmly, "I love you, and I'll always be there for you. But my life with Maria is my priority now. I hope you can respect that, and I hope we can have a healthy relationship without compromising my marriage." Irene's response was hesitant, her tone softer than he expected. She seemed to understand that her son was no longer the same man she could sway with guilt or manipulation. Though she didn't entirely accept his new boundaries, she gave a reluctant acknowledgement that felt like a small step forward. When Alex hung up, he looked at Maria with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. "That was different," he said, smiling. "For the first time, I feel like I'm building a family that's entirely ours." Maria squeezed his hand, her eyes filled with warmth. "I'm proud of you, Alex. We're in this together, and I finally feel like we have a real future to look forward to." As they embraced, Alex felt a weight lift from his heart, the remnants of old loyalties finally put to rest. For the first time in his life, he was living by his own choices, ready to nurture the life he and Maria had fought so hard to reclaim. They were finally free from the shadows of the past, stepping forward as true partners into a future filled with trust, respect, and the genuine love they'd worked so hard to protect.